Okay.
Wow.
Here we go, guys. All right, let's do it. Whoever you are in the control, make sure I look good. That's important. Doesn't matter what he looks like. Try to get a side shot. This is my better side. As long as I look like a knockout, this is the important thing. Him doesn't matter.
You know what? You have a full head of hair, so.
I know. That's where. Okay. So whenever you want, you go ahead.
I have to tell you, just seeing you, I'm overwhelmed.
Right.
It's a joyful moment for me, simply because I've been chasing myself to chase you for a while.
Really?
Because I was schedules. I'm not here a lot and not here as often as I should be. Big shout out to Ben Bodenheim for connecting us.
Oh.
Ben is a dedicated listener. I have a lot of dedicated listeners.
Really?
Yes. And, following on the status journey and seeing where I'm up to throughout the day and giving me suggestions and comments and questioning me and battling me. Ben is one of them.
Beautiful.
He's
Yeah.
definitely a battler. I have to tell you, though, what I notice you walking in right now, you have a lot on your mind. I could just tell, just by the way your brain space is very full. I know so. I know so.
Well, I have 2 interviews today.
Really? You have another one set today now?
Mm-hmm.
You're good
7 p.m.
7 p.m. So then let's knock this out of the park.
No, let's have a good time. I hope I don't fail you. It's boring. No one pay attention. That's okay. No, we're all good.
Hey.
Tell me when we go on.
We're already on.
Oh, we're on?
That's how I work.
We're on right now.
We're on right now. Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. We start. Welcome back, everybody, to the None of Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Michael Greenfield, and we are sponsored and produced by the Prime Source team. If you are a senior care facility looking to save on your expenses, come to us. We know how to represent you well. We know how to represent all the vendors as well for sales and marketing and brand building. Of course, the None of Your Business podcast is an extension of our marketing team. So we appreciate all the followers, the listeners, the subscribers, the comments. Keep it coming. We love a good debate. And speaking of debates, we have Rabbi Tovia Singer here with us today. So I'm so excited to welcome you here to the program. Thank you so much for making the time to sit down and really schmooze.
Well, it's a joy to be here with you, Michael.
Yes. Well, you know what?
Michael
I've been going by
Green-
Chaim. I've been going by Chaim Greenfield.
Chaim Greenfield.
Yes.
Where'd you get such a goyish name like that?
I'm named after the Chida. So
Really?
Our brothers are Chaim, Yosef, and David.
Wow.
And there's another one who's older, but the Chida was Chaim, Yosef, David, Azulai. And then I'm a twin. So Mimini, Michael, Smoli, Gavriel. When the nurse put me and my brother on my mother's arms, she put me on the right and my brother on the left. So my mom added the name Michael and Gavriel. So
Wow.
I decided not to be Chaim when I went into the business world, but I'm dumping Michael and I'm fully owning Chaim, and I'm always Chaim in Israel, and people who know me from my beginning years like that. So enough about me.
Yes.
I want to utilize every single second we have.
Sure.
So, Tovia,
Tovia.
what's Tovia? What's that name?
This is my great-grandfather's name. It's one of the names of Moshe Rabbeinu, and he appears in Zechariah chapter 6, verse 10, as one of the Jews of Babylon who came to the land of Israel wanting to donate money to the building of the Second Temple. And there was a question asked of whether we should accept money from outside of Israel, from Babylon, from diaspora, to support Israel. Could they be involved in building the new state, the Second Temple? And that question is brought to Zechariah. But it's also the name of Moses. And my great-grandfather was murdered by the Nazis in the spring of 1944 in Hungary, when most of Hungarian Jewry was destroyed. So I'm named after him.
Let's get into that. I think that one of the things that I would like to do on this podcast today is break down who you are, where you're from, a little bit more about you, and then head towards the great, wonderful work that you're doing, fighting for Jews and really understanding. Like you just dropped, a number and a name. I have no idea what you were saying in terms of, quoting different parts of the Torah and the Tanakh. These are things that you know, and you don't really need a major introduction. But for those of us that don't know, you are an expert when it comes to understanding the Tanakh completely, the Quran, the New Testament, and breaking it down in very simple way to understand it, and really battling the battle on behalf of all of us. And on behalf of all of us who know you, a tremendous thank you for all the work that you've been doing and all the effort that you're putting in. And it's just, it's amazing that we have someone representing us like you in the world. And it's so important that we have more of you, and you're educating the younger ones. And with Hashem's help, we're going to continue educating all of us until the Mashiach comes, and we can all enjoy the salvation and get away from all the hurt. So let's start with that. What's your background? Where did you grow up? Who are your parents and grandparents? Tell me a little bit about, spice it up a little for me of who's Tovia? Who is this Moshe Rabbeinu that we're sitting in front of today?
Right. So I grew up, I don't think you heard of it, maybe, Borough Park. So, yeah. And, growing up in the 60s and 70s, all the non-Jews around me did not like me, and I didn't know why. But when you were born in 1960, 15 years after the Holocaust, it was ubiquitous to see people with numbers on their arm. That's the world I grew up in. And there's nothing I could do to stop that, because it happened. European Jewry was destroyed before I was born, so there's nothing I can do. But I knew the non-Jews didn't like me, and they reminded me if I ever made the mistake of walking past a group of Irish, Italian Catholics, they always told me that I was a Christ killer, and I thought they were insane. So I thought that the world I was going to grow up in was a world that was filled with hatred, but made sense. The non-Jews, for some reason, hate us, want to destroy us. I was very aware that the Jews were only murdered in Christian countries. And but then when I encountered with my family on a Saturday night in Midtown Manhattan, going to a restaurant called Moshe P. King, Jews for Jesus on the streets of Midtown Manhattan by the Diamond District. Jews for Jesus. That might as well said Jews for Hezbollah. It's just like insane, like Jews for Jesus. Why would you join? It didn't make any sense to me. And I began to argue with them, as maybe you have, many people do. You engage them, you encounter them. It was a conversation that went nowhere very quickly. It was infuriating. And also, I wasn't really prepared for it. There was nothing in my yeshiva background. I learned in the mirror. It was a very serious education, but nothing prepared me to understand Christian literature and the passages they were quoting. And ultimately, I walked away very unsatisfied with that. The following summer, I visited where we are right now, Jerusalem. My uncle lived in the old city of Jerusalem, and he just happened to have a Christian Bible that was given to him as a gift from a pastor that spent the previous Shabbat at his home. And when I came to the old city and my cousins walked me through the Jewish quarter, because after all, the taxi can't take you, my uncle shows me this King James Bible. Give a look at what we have here. It's like he had the manual from the other team. He was like really excited. Give a look at what I got here. And I told him that's exactly what I wanted to read. And I began to study it. That's really one of the most important events, tectonic events in my life, when I began to study the Christian Bible. And to my shock, I realized, number one, why they hate us. That means I was fairly confident, although I know little about Christianity, that Christians didn't like us for some reason. It was very obvious to me. But when I read the Christian Bible, and the Gospels in particular, are all stories. And the stories, I don't know if you ever made the mistake of like opening Al Jazeera or the New York Times, and you're going, oh God, they really hate us. So it's like every story, the Jews are the villains, and Jesus is just the protagonist who can do nothing wrong. And the Jews, for no reason, want to destroy God's Son. It was horrible. Number two was that the Christian Bible had altered the Jewish scriptures in order to make it appear Christological. Just plainly, it was completely not true. Like, it was a complete lie.
What stood out?
Oh, that Matthew was quoting Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, and misquoting what it said. Moreover, the Christian Bible did something that robbed Christians of a guardrail, and that is that the Christian Bible in the Hebrew scriptures, mistranslate their text in order to comport with the New Testament mistranslations, which means Christians are playing tennis without a net. There's nothing there to measure, nothing to guide, because all the Christian must do is go back in his King James Bible and look it up, and the King James Bible on Isaiah 7:14 will say virgin in order to support Matthew 1:23. So Christians, I realize, to my horror, are operating spiritually without any guardrails. And we don't know each other, but I presume you went to yeshiva and you learned Hebrew, and by the time you were 10 years old, I can give you a chumash, 5 books of Moses, and you can read it like you can read a newspaper. Well, no Christian child is taught Hebrew. None. Now, they can learn Hebrew in college, but it's too late. So therefore, they're utterly reliant on translations. When I say playing tennis without a net, I mean that. That means there's no way they can tell that there's something off, there's something wrong. Now, we have, of course, translations, our scroll, but most of us don't need it. There are a lot of conversions, a lot of Bali Tshuva returning. So therefore, I knew that I had to stop this. I met a Jew at the Western Wall. My uncle lived in the Jewish quarter on Miskav Ladach. I'd pray at the Western Wall. Fellow taps me on the shoulder as I'm talking to God in a way that I'd never spoken to him before. I turn around in the middle of davening, and he asks me if I know the Lord. What am I doing here? Playing handball? I mean, what am I doing here? I said, of course I do. I went to yeshiva. He said, you mean you know who Yeshua is? I said, of course I do. I went to yeshiva with him. He was in my class. I was thinking Yeshua Jacobus. I had no clue what he's even talking about. But we began to unravel what was happening here. He was a Jewish fellow from New York, and we began to study together in Israel, returned to New York, and he did tshuva. He's today a Rosh Yeshiva in Monsey. Yeah. So what was shocking was that when you meet these people who are in the church, Jews who are in the church, they seem so sure, but when they repent and they return back to the Jewish faith, it's tectonic. So now, I didn't hear a voice or see a vision, but I knew that I wanted to devote my life to getting Jews out of the church. That was very important to me. I began to write about this, and then the advent of YouTube. So,
what kind of Jew was Jesus?
Well, there's a problem there. If you would ask me what kind of Jew was Paul, I can answer you, because he wrote a lot. He was a prolific writer. We have 13 letters that survive of his. Jesus wrote nothing, which means that we're looking at him through the filter of mythology of the Christian Bible. And the Gospels, Paul never met Jesus, so the Gospels were all written at least 40 years after he was dead, and they're just mythology over mythology over mythology. So we don't know. And in fact, in New Testament scholarship, the quest for the historical Jesus is what everyone's after. That's what Albert Schweitzer wrote about in his most famous book in the beginning of the 20th century. People can guess, but no one can know who he was. We just know what he wasn't.
Do you ever guess?
He's not the Messiah. I think he was probably from the northern Galilee. It seems unlikely that someone would invent the name Nazareth. And he probably had a lot of contention with Jewish people. That's just what seeps through in the Gospels. That means he's conflicting with Jews constantly. So that's the guess who he was. If he was crucified, which is everyone's starting point, it seems likely that he was actually crucified by the empire. So that would mean the empire would not crucify somebody for any ordinary crime. There were cheaper, faster ways to execute people. But crucifixion was reserved for people who were accused of insurrection. That somehow the empire thought that he was saying the end is coming, or overturned the Roman Empire, or something like that. That's, for most scholars, that's a starting point. But we we have zero that he wrote. The Christian Bible obviously portrays him in the very way that the Book of Mormon portrays Joseph Smith, in a very flattering way, with enormous mythology. As an example, Mark, the earliest of the Gospels, there's nothing supernatural about the way he was born. We're introduced to him as an adult. Matthew and Mark is written about 70, 75. Matthew and Luke about 10 years later. Now we have a virgin birth. He was conceived supernaturally. So there's so much thick mythology. The real Mark, which ends at 16 verse 8. Now, today's Bibles, for those of you watching this, think that it continues to verse 20, but that was a later interpolation. There's no resurrection accounts in the book of Mark, but we do have that in Matthew, Luke, and John. So there's so much embellishment that it's really hard to do that.
I'm just curious. So if Jesus came today and came out and looked at his whole world that was created for him, or on his behalf, what do you think he would say?
Or he'd be shocked that people worship him as a god. He would be stunned that people believe in the doctrine of the Trinity. He would be stunned that people thought that he would preach that you don't have to keep Torah any longer. That we could say with certainty, with virtual certainty. This is the humanities. But if we could just presume that he was some sort of religious itinerant person, to think that you should teach that because Mashiach came, you don't have to keep Shabbos anymore, to teach that an innocent person could die for the sins of the wicked, vicarious atonement, which was well known in the ancient world, utterly pagan, that this Pauline Neoplatonic Greek thinking is what would seize Christianity, that Christians would believe that while God is one, there are three persons that have distinct hypostatic entities. Fancy word, I apologize, but it's just because the church uses that kind of unconventional language in order to mask fig leaf doctrines that are unsavory. He would have been shocked. He would have been shocked to know that such a religion would emerge from him.
Wow. I'm very much enjoying this conversation, and I see where you're going with it, and I want to get back to it. I still want to go back a little bit to your upbringing,
Sure.
and thank you for explaining to me what got you into it and what sparked your interest, and your uncle and going to the Western Wall, and that's just amazing to hear. You went to regular yeshivas?
Yeah.
Siblings?
I have 4 sisters, amazing women.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that must have been interesting.
Yeah.
What did that teach you?
They're great kids. It's my 4 sisters. That's like growing up with, what's his name, Stewie, and what was that cartoon for adults? I forgot what it's called.
I don't remember.
My sisters were perfect. They went to school. They were the best kids in the class, never got in trouble, always did their homework. I was a yeshiva kid who couldn't understand. So I thought the girls were all perfect and boys were just a mess.
Okay.
They were great. They're great.
I don't know if that changed much.
No. And they remain to be some of the finest women I've ever known.
Wow.
Yeah, they are. And married amazing guys. That's the way it is. They're amazing women.
So you grew up in Borough Park.
Oh, yeah.
You went to regular mainstream yeshivas?
Oh, yeah, very
Which
much
yeshiva?
so. Torah Samus and then the Mirror.
Okay. Did you experience anything throughout that process of learning about the world that you are so...
No matter where your question ends, the answer will be no. No matter where you meander with your question, the answer is going to be no with an exclamation point. We were... In the 60s, Rebbeim were Europeans and did not understand American kids, and did not, for the most part, did not understand. I just couldn't understand what they were talking about.
Well, let's talk about you then. During that process of growing up, were there challenges that you had with God?
No. I believed in it completely. I never for one second didn't believe. I always believed. The only thing was that we never learned the prophets. I mean, we never learned, I'm a little Joshua, Judge, maybe, Trop, but we didn't. So Isaiah, we never learned Isaiah when we went to Yeshiva. 0, nothing. When learning the Talmud and Jeremiah was quoted, no one got up and looked it up. And if we did, we would have discovered that we don't understand what it's talking about. Isaiah, for your viewers who don't know this, literally more than 90% of it is poetry. This is a huge work of 66 chapters. There are only 5 chapters that you can pick up and read and understand exactly what it's talking about. The rest of it, you would go, 61 chapters, you go, I have no idea what he's talking about. It's all poetry. I mean, some of it's easier, some not.
And therefore what?
What's that?
And therefore what? Meaning it's
therefore it's very, very difficult. And if
Got it.
you have no background, then it's very difficult. I teach Isaiah here in Jerusalem. Go through the book of Isaiah. It's on YouTube for those of you who want to watch it. Go to my introduction video on YouTube. Well, I mean, once you know it, of course, it's magnificent. It's just that yeshiva didn't convey that to me. Yecheskel, Ezekiel, which conveys the most numinous prophecies of the Messianic age. It's rich with details that's not found anywhere else in Tanakh. I was just marvelous. I mean, I love Tanakh, but we missed that out. And the yeshiva world grants that it messed up on teaching the prophets specifically, the Nevi'im, that central part. And given that we're living in a Messianic period, meaning we're living at a time when Messianic prophecy is unfolding, it's more important for this generation than any generation in history to know these numinous oracles very, very well.
So start a yeshiva today, let's say, for argument's sake, and you're creating the itinerary and the classes and the education.
Yeah.
What would you do differently? How would you educate the young generation today? What would you start with?
Yeah, I would start with the Abarbanel. If you have the Abarbanel, medieval, meaning he was born in 1437 in Portugal, died in 1508 in Italy, lived in Spain for 11 years. He was one of the greatest minds that writes a commentary on the Nevi'im in a very short time in 1481. I would just be teaching the Nevi'im, the prophets, with the Abarbanel. That's what I'd be doing. And that's what I do now. And I'd be doing now, right now, because we're living in a very unique period, I would say, and I say this to the rabbis who are watching us, who actually have control over, you should be reading Ezekiel from 34 to the end, 48, right now. Ezekiel, for those who don't know, is divided into 3 discrete segments. 1 and 2 is about the destruction, why the first temple was destroyed, and what God will do to the nation that persecuted us. But from 34 to 48 is all about the Messianic age. So right now, I urge every yeshiva to start teaching Ezekiel and begin with 34 immediately, because we're going to go through Milchemes Gog uMagog, the final war, the Valley of Dry Bones, the Third Temple. So right now, that's vital to know that.
You're giving a lot of credibility to prophets and
Yes.
hanging your hat a lot on this concept of learning from them, right?
Yeah.
And why? And is there anyone that argues that and says that, that's not, where does all that credibility coming from your perspective?
If you got a letter in the mail and the return address was God, wouldn't you open it? Of course you would. Wouldn't you read it with trembling hands? Of course you would. I mean, we have that. Not only that, we are told by the medieval commentators, Maimonides is an example, he criticizes his contemporaries. Maimonides was born in 1135. He passed away in the winter of 1204. He criticizes contemporaries for speculating about the Messianic age and about making calculations in Mishnah Torah and the Laws of Kings in chapter 11. And he says only the generation who will live at that time, only they will completely understand these passages. Well, guess what? You and me are here now, and we're witnessing the events that have been spoken of and hoped for and dreamed of 2,500 years from the time of Ezekiel. Ezekiel contains the roadmap to where we are right now and what's ahead. So that's the last thing in the world I'd want to ignore. I mean, God is telling us what's happening and also why it's happening. It means, why is there a war at the end of days? Why do the Jews have to return to the land of Israel? Why is there a war? Why is there a cataclysmic attack on Israel that will take the lives of many, many civilians, that triggers Milchemes Gog uMagog? The Talmud knew this was important. In fact, in Tractate Megillah 30, Daf Lamed, the Gemara tells us that, in fact, Mechemes Gog uMagog, this end-time war, begins on Sukkot. Therefore, on the Shabbos of Chol Hamoed Sukkot, meaning the Sabbath on the intermediate days of the Festival of Tabernacles, read Ezekiel 38 and 39, which is the war between Israel and Persia, explicitly. The Jews return to the land, seize it, have full control of Jerusalem, and go to war with a country 1,000 miles east. And the whole world will be watching it in real time. Israel destroys the enemies, and then the nations will know that I am God, and Israel will know I am God. How would I ignore that? I mean, our sages 2,000 years ago knew that's it, and here we are.
Love the answer. Love your perspective and your knowledge on so many of these things. One of the prophets you're able to tap into, have a conversation with in person, or King David, or Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu. Who would it be? What would you talk about? What would you ask?
We have all the information we need.
No. But you personally, it happens.
I would want to meet Daniel, only because he was such a remarkable person.
Tell us a little bit about him.
So Daniel was a prodigy, a genius, and he was taken in by Nebuchadnezzar, the very person that destroyed the first temple. And he was able to interpret a dream for Nebuchadnezzar. It was a very troubling dream, and Nebuchadnezzar was no idiot. He said to all of his assistants, whoever's going to tell me what I dreamt, because he knew from Pharaoh gave it away. He said, in order for me to know that your interpretation is correct, tell me what I dreamt, and then tell me what it means. And Daniel tells him his dream of seeing a great statue, head of gold, chest of bronze, legs of brass and of iron, and legs of brass and legs of clay and iron. And this is what it means. There are 4 kingdoms that would have shlita, of sovereignty over Israel, and ultimately the leg and iron, which is Edom, would be destroyed. The point is that he could have had it all. He was only 14 years old at the time. He was just a giant. But this is typical, that great people accomplish their greatest works when they're very, very young. And he said he could have had anything. He was made like viceroy, essentially, of what's called the Neo-Babylonian Empire. But he deferred, and he said, it's not from me, it's all from God. Have we encountered Jews that sold out? We have. I can think of a senator from the state of New York that's let us down because he's reached the highest point of power of any Jew as he brags. That was the opposite of Daniel. Daniel never betrayed his principles, like the Abarbanel. The Abarbanel rose up to be the head of finances of Portugal and then Spain. He never sold out. These are the people I really want to encounter.
So what are you going to say or ask?
It's I just want to be in their presence. When I was in the presence of Moshe Feinstein, Lubavitcher Rebbe, years ago, I just would watch them and just be shocked and listen to them and receive a blessing from them. We have it. It's all spelled out for us. We have the prophecy of Ezekiel 38 and 39. We know exact. I'm going to say something that sounds almost blasphemous. So I want the audience, to give me a chance at this. So we understand the Messianic age, or the events that lead to it, better than the prophets did. How could that be? I just finished telling you. Okay, let me explain. See, the Messianic age could happen in many ways, meaning the end game is that we win 1-0. But how do we get there is complete chaos. And the Talmud identifies this, that it could be a righteous generation based on the passage at the end of chapter 60 of Isaiah, 60 verse 22, and then it happens with great miracles, or it could be a Dor Chayev, a guilty generation, and it happens in a very plain, mundane way. So there's all this open space of how is that goal scored. Let me first tell you, I know nothing about soccer, but I have a sense of what the business end is. So you can win by scoring an incredible shot. The goalie can make an error. It could be a penalty. They didn't know this. They really didn't know, not because they didn't have that information. It's in a sense like, this is not true. God foreknew, but God didn't know because He gave us complete free will. So we actually have copious details because we're actually living the Messianic age in real time. We're able to observe what they couldn't know. The reason they couldn't know is not that God couldn't tell them. It's because it can happen in a range of ways depending on what kind of nation we would be.
See, based on free will.
Based on free will. And there's a key passage. Why is there such a visceral condemnation of making calculations? Because of a key passage in Isaiah chapter 59, verse 20. Uvo l'tziongo l'shavei feshav Yaakov. It's familiar to you because you say it in your davening every day. And a Redeemer, meaning the Messiah, will come to Zion specifically when Jacob repents. So the repentance of the Jews must repent in order for them to trigger the coming of the Mashiach. So therefore, the prophets would have given anything, Rashi, Maimonides would have given anything to live during our time, to have this kind of detail. But we are observing it in real time because the nation is engineered. I don't know you, but I feel confident that the person you were on October 6, 2023, does not exist any longer and will never exist, and neither will I. That means our nation will never be the same from that horrible Saturday morning when 1,189 Jews were murdered and 251 were taken hostage. We'll never be the same. Whoever we were on Sukkot of that year, those people don't exist anymore. We are utterly transformed as a nation, and there's a revolution going on here in Israel. And we're observing a series of events that are unfolding now. That's Zechariah 12, which this massive attack is. It's called Mashiach ben Yosef in the Talmud. Wow. So we have access in real time to what's unfolding right now.
Yeah, I'm glad I let you finish your sentence because it makes sense now, actually. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You have a tremendous understanding, and you're quoting things, and it's one of the things I think that I love and people love about you is your real deep understanding, and to have a good debate and, pull out facts. You've also studied other teachings, right? So, Navi, prophecy, and the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Torah, of course, right? What other things have surprised you and things that you've learned or studied? And specifically, I'm thinking the Quran. What have you learned from studying these teachings that you can tell us affects us in ways that we need to understand in living this Messianic times?
So I've read the Quran more than a few times, and I can tell you that I don't even understand half of it. Meaning, the Quran, unlike the Christian Bible, is incoherent. Almost most of it is incoherent. It's incohesive, and passages move from one topic to another on a dime. So it's extremely difficult to understand. Very, very difficult. It's even difficult to know when texts were written. In fact, there are many Muslim scholars that believe that that no one could really understand it completely. And in fact, the purpose of the Quran, so the word Quran really means a recital, that the purpose of it really was to recite. Like Bal Koreh, it's really the same word, like the person who reads. So the Quran is supposed to be read. I remember living in Indonesia, serving as rabbi, and hearing the Quran recited. It sounds terrific, but reading it, so what you have in it is things that I would recognize. I would recognize as things that are very Jewish and radically monotheistic. There is no God but the true God, la ilaha illallah. There's no God but the true God, and an affront assault on the doctrine of the Trinity of Christianity. Then you have ideas that you would find in Christianity as Jesus being the Messiah, Mashiach, but he's not the Mashiach of Christianity. It means he's really a prophet. So the danger in Abrahamic religions, we're using the same word, but we don't mean the same thing. So Muslims believe that Jesus, or Isa, the J didn't exist back then, that Jesus was the Messiah, but they don't believe he was the son of David. They don't believe he was God. They oppose it completely. So it's a very, very different kind of person. But they believe he was born to a virgin named Miriam, and the Quran, this chapter is named after her, and so on. So, and you have many ideas that you find in Midrashic literature, that God put a mountain over the head of the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. It's in the Quran, that Moses, a little infant, grabbed a piece of red-hot coal and put it in his mouth. It's in the Quran as well. So that's what I recognize. I recognize Midrashic literature, Talmudic literature, stories found in the Torah, and also Christian ideas about Jesus and Christian ideas about the sayings of Jesus, or more about things that Jesus did as an infant that's found in some obscure text, not necessarily the canon.
Fascinating. You know what's also fascinating? That you were a rabbi in Indonesia. I'm sorry, I couldn't just hear that and forget it.
Right.
Whoa. So now you got to take me through the era of life. Let's go back to your yeshiva days. You're done with yeshiva. You went to Israel to yeshiva?
No, I learned in the Mir in America.
Learned in the Mir in America.
Yeah.
Who influenced you then in any way?
By far, Rabbi Avigdor Miller. Rabbi Avigdor Miller, because he was down the street from the Mir. The Mir is on, I believe, Avenue R. It's on Ocean Parkway. And Rabbi Avigdor Miller's shul was just up Ocean Parkway. It was just...
Yeah, I was lucky enough to go to two of his shiurim. One of the most popular shiurim he ever gave, which is telling people that if you smoke, that you're putting yourself in danger, and because it says ushmartem es nafshosechem, you have to be careful of your life. That if you smoke, you are a Russia, which is one of his shiurim.
Right.
And I was there for the shiur, and I remember someone asking. He says, "Excuse me, but my rabbi, he sits and learns all day, and he smokes. He's a Russia that knows how to learn."
Right. So the Rabbi Avigdor, you asked me earlier on, what would I say to this person, that person?
Yeah.
So I was in the presence of Rabbi Avigdor Miller a lot, and I never said anything to him. I just stood and I shook in his presence. He was a person who had hadras panim. He stood like this. He was whatever. He was that. What you hear on his audio programs that are widely available, that was him. He had a complete encyclopedic knowledge of everything. He was American, and he also had a degree in English. So he was a remarkable orator. He was completely unfiltered. And also his praise of Muslims, he said, that they dress with snua, they dress modestly, they pray. There's something that's praiseworthy. There's Zera Avraham. So also his clarity on that point influenced me. I mean, I'm a religious Zionist. That didn't matter. But the point is, he spoke clearly and made complete sense to me, and he built his ideas. He was a giant. I mean, absolute giant. He just knew everything there was to know. But the key was he knew how to make complex ideas easy to understand. So he was the big influence on me, in that I thought to myself, I want to do that. But I was not petrified of him, but when he walked, what it was like when he would walk by, you just watch him and realize he's walking Sefer Torah. I mean,
wow.
But he was, again, American, so he knew how to speak to American boys. Yeah. He didn't work for anybody, even though in his earlier years, he, I believe, was a rabbi of a young Israel in Connecticut, I believe, and so on. But now he was completely unrestrained. He was able to say whatever he thought. And he wanted us to think for ourselves, but he wanted to teach us how to think. So his complete knowledge of Tanakh, he knew Tanakh cold, He knew...
Big shout out to the Miller family and whoever's organizing those booklets that end up in the shuls all across the United States. They always keep me busy during davening, and I always learn something from reading it. So Thank you for that. So take me through that journey of where you are today. From there to here, where have you traveled? What have you done?
I knew fairly well that my role was to help Jews who were in the church come back to the Jewish faith. How do you do that? So people would ask, I would lecture a lot, and incidentally, Christians would show up to my lectures, who I found to be totally different than the Christians I had met as a kid. They were very nice. In Yiddish, they were menschlich. They were... so that I realized then that the Christian Bible had poisoned the minds of these children that was so anti-Semitic. But I started making cassette tapes. Like Avigdor Miller had cassette tapes, which we all would listen to. And so I made cassette tapes of my lectures. My thought was, when someone asked me about Isaiah 53, if I can just record a lecture of Isaiah 53 and just have someone a cassette tape that really cost whatever it was, 20 cents, it was nothing, then here it is. Here's Isaiah 53, Daniel 9, here's Daniel 9. That was the thinking back then. How can I just do, there was no internet back then.
Right.
None of that existed. No internet was very valuable for me as well, in that I actually had to meet the Christian, talk to them, and more importantly, listen to them. So I had to engage with them. There was no software or chat. I had to study the Christian Bible thoroughly, had to study the writings of the church fathers. I understand what they were saying and why they were saying it. Why is this attractive? Why would a reasoned person, a sober mind, believe this stuff? Because it forced me, and there was no, prior to me, there was really no one doing this before me. It was like there was a whole new idea. It was a new problem. Jews for Jesus started in 1973. So that's when it exploded in the 1970s, a very difficult time for America, hippies, Watergate, Vietnam, Jews for Jesus. What else is new, right? Right.
So you were lecturing, you were getting involved, and you were living in Brooklyn at that time.
Yeah. Then I moved to Muncie, right?
Oh, then you moved to Muncie.
Right.
Then what? Keep going. How do you got to Israel?
Oh, so I eventually got someone out of the church who asked me if I wanted to move to Israel. He became very wealthy very quickly and said, I have houses in Jerusalem. Do you want to live? And I lived in the old city of Jerusalem for 8 years. And everything was taken care of for me. That's when I wrote my books, Let's Get Biblical. And I was able to do a lot of work then, but flying back and forth from the United States to Israel. And I guess then internet emerges, so that YouTube becomes available, and then putting the videos on YouTube and making that accessible. But then the call asking me from the Jewish community in Indonesia. Now, I know you're asking, there are Jews in Indonesia. Indonesia is the 4th largest country in the world. It's nearly 300 million people. It's the largest Muslim country in the world. But as it turns out, many Jews who were there, when I say many, less than 20,000 Jews, as far as our estimates are there. And many of them had converted to Christianity between World War II, when Indonesia became independent, and now in the modern period. And would you be willing to come to Indonesia? And there was a person who was not Jewish, but because of my YouTube videos, changed his life and became a Ben Noach, willing to underwrite any Jew who would become a Christian to study with me at a major convention on the island of Papua, Jeremiah, the capital. And I was asked, would I be willing to come? And I went, of course. I mean, that's like winning the lottery. So it was simply paradise to be there, but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Jews who had become Christians studied with me for a few days and left the church. It had a very big impact, and they asked me would I stay on as rabbi. And of course I would, of course, because it was so vital. There'd just been nothing there. And I was there for 5 years. And by the 5th year I was there, so now we're in 2018, I came to Israel to do a debate, a Christian, at what was then called the King Solomon Hotel. And I realized at the end of the debate, which is on YouTube, many people came over to me and told me that there were a lot of Messianic Jews in the country and brought their friends with them who were in the church. And I realized then that it was important for me to be in Israel, that the problem of mission activity here in the Holy Land is spread like a cancer. I didn't anticipate any more Jews in Indonesia were going to get out. And I decided then that when I returned to Indonesia, I was going to close up and then return back to Israel, which I did. And I applied for Aliyah, went to Singapore, where the Jewish agency was not Jewish aid, Jewish Israel embassy is at the embassy of Singapore, and I was except for Aliyah, they all knew who I was. And then I made Aliyah and landed 7 years ago today. Is today June 4th?
I think so.
I don't know, whatever day it is. So it was 7 years ago today that my El Al flight landed.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow, Mazel Tov. Congratulations.
Landed in Israel. Because when I had lived in Israel before, I was just in and out. So I was just always on a tourist visa. But then I made Aliyah.
How were you making money after that? Like, what were you doing for income? You're having a debate. You're doing God's work. You're representing Jews. You're fighting missionaries. You know, making people understand it. So where's income coming from?
Well, people are supporting my work. People today, now people who watch me know that I never ask for anything. I'm very careful about it. I never say buy my books because I feel it sort of contaminates the message. 3 times a year, I do a video asking people to donate, and people are generous. They want to see this work continue.
Beautiful.
But everybody who watches me knows I never try to sell a book. I never, ever ask for money except 3 times a year. There was once an emergency. It doesn't matter what it was. There was once an emergency. But people know because I never ask that when I do, and I do that before Rosh Hashanah, before Pesach, for Hanukkah, that's when I ask. That's it. It's going to be one video. I talk about what I'm doing, and so people support it, and people do buy my books on our website, Outreach Judaism. Everybody who's watching me now, who has watched me, knows that I never talk about it.
Okay. Well, that's why I was asking. Yeah.
So that's what happens. So people make sure that...
It's good to know, and I appreciate where you're coming from on that. You said missionaries. Let's talk about it for a second. What's bothering you so much about missionaries? If you can explain it to me on a simple level.
Yeah. Fundamentalist Christians, not your Hillary Clinton Christian, not the Roman Catholics, but fundamentalist Christians are targeting Jews for conversion. And whereas the church, you're probably wondering, well, they've always tried to convert us to Christianity. In the 70s, early 70s, they developed a new technique. Remember, early 70s, it was right after the 6-Day War. There was a messianic fervor in the world. The church realized that it had to evangelize the Jews. Jerusalem, after all, now is in the hands of Israel, which is messianic prophecy. It's very, very clear. They thought Jesus was going to make a second coming by the year 2000. Whoops. But the point is there's this push to convert the Jews, and missionaries gather, the evangelicals gather in Western Switzerland to figure out why had the church failed in the past to evangelize the Jews, and what could we do now differently to succeed in finally converting the Jews. And they discovered 2 points, and I want the viewers to listen like they've never listened in their lives. Number one, they realized that Jewish people who are not religious don't want to convert to Christianity because for some reason Jews equate Christianity with persecution. Yeah, I know. I'm surprised too. But I never heard a Jew go, Jesus Christ, what am I to hear those words? Say it again. I want to get more nachas and pleasure and say it's such a gishma. Most Jewish people see Christianity as a, not just alien, but as our implacable enemy, and it's hostile. And so therefore they came with a technique to address this. You're Jewish, we love you, we love the Jews. And those Christians that persecuted Jews in the name of Jesus, they weren't real Christians. So that was number one. So we love you and we support Israel, and they really do support Israel. 70 million Americans are Christian Zionists, the largest voting bloc in America, and they're extremely pro-Israel. So they can actually point to that and say, look, the second issue they realize is that Jews don't want to convert to another religion. And I'm talking about you. I'm talking about your cousin who's not observant. Even though she might not be observant and doesn't go to synagogue or whatever, but she does not want to be a Christian. She is proud of her Jewish identity. And that's where the second technique could come in that's been devastatingly successful. It goes like this. When you become a believer in Yeshua, You're not converting to another religion. Oh, no. You're becoming a Messianic Jew, a completed Jew, a filled Jew. It's the most Jewish thing you can do. After all, Jesus was a Jew. His disciples are Jewish. How can it not be Jewish to believe in Jesus? And then what they do is they blur the distinctions between Judaism and Christianity in order to lure Jews who might otherwise resist a straightforward Christian message. So they don't call him Jesus Christ. It's Yeshua HaMashiach. It's not the New Testament. It's the Brit Chadashah. They will never say, come to church. Jews don't want to go to church. Jews definitely do not want to go to church. They didn't want to go to shul. How are you going to get them into a church? Come to a Messianic synagogue, which is a church that's dressed up to look like a shul. Don't say convert to Christianity. You'll never hear them say that. Become a completed and fulfilled Messianic Jew. So they engage in this kind of sophistry of just lingo. There's no substantive difference between what's called a Messianic Jew and a Christian, except that one is using rabbinic Judaism, cultural icons and norms and liturgy, wearing a kippah and tzitzis, all of that. But they are thoroughly Christian. There's no difference in doctrine between what Jews for Jesus believes, which is a Baptist mission to the Jews. Jews for Jesus is a Baptist. That's just one of more than 1,000 missionary groups operating in here and in North America, targeting the Jews for conversion. They're all over the place. But that's a Baptist mission to convert the Jews to Christianity. So it's those two methods of presenting ourselves as loving Jews, and, well, we are against the Catholics who hate.
I got to say, from a branding, marketing perspective, I mean, kudos to them. They did something right in terms of how to brand themselves, and
that's correct.
So that's interesting to learn, and I appreciate learning about that. I'm curious, through your journey of learning about all these different ideas and concepts, has there been, let me ask it a little differently. When is the last time, intellectually, you changed your mind?
Oh, yeah. So I used to think that the war over the land of Israel was largely political, and then somehow had a religious, but then like, for instance, when Sunni and Shia split very, very early on after Muhammad's death, the split was really a political split, but eventually religious aspects evolved. I realized after not just October 7th, but the anti-Semitism after October 7th, that it really is a completely religious war between Israel and its interlocutors. And it was not about politics. It wasn't about, it was about an idea of Dar al-Islam, which means that lands that have come into control of Islam cannot be under the control of anybody but Muslims, and that this was in fact a religious war. However, I couldn't understand Jewish. So we have an idea that the Bnei Yishmael, the Arabs, not just Muslim, but the Bnei Yishmael would do tshuva. They would return to the Jewish people. We would unite with them, and our chief enemy would be Persia, which is so historically makes no sense, because Persia was a benevolent empire to the Jews. The Sasanian Empire was really nice, as the Talmud was written in the Sasanian Empire in southern Mesopotamia. But now, so now we see what's actually happening is that, so I realize that the conflict we have really is a religious one, and politics has nothing to do with it. And number two is I realize what's happening is that Persia's role, because they're attacking the Persian Gulf states now. They're attacking real Arabs who are the descendants of Ishmael, not Muslims in the sub-Sahara. They're attacking specific. And what's happening is the leader of Saudi Arabia is going, if it wasn't for my dad, I would have a peace treaty with Israel. It doesn't matter whether what he's saying now is true or not correct, if it has anything to do with his dad, but that he would never have said that 10 years ago. So what's happening in the Islamic world, in the Sunni Arab Gulf states, is that they realize that their problem is not to the west, Israel, but the problem is to the east, Iran. And therefore, everything is playing out. So they're my view has shifted.
Interesting. I appreciate that. I have friends that buy and rent buildings, apartments in Jerusalem and Israel.
Yeah.
Something that I've been recently thinking about when you were talking earlier about Christians and the impact that they have for Israel and the support they have for Israel. I have to tell you something interesting I just learned. And I knew about it for a long time, that when you buy property in Israel, like an apartment, all right, that's sitting on a piece of property, there's a concept called where you're leasing the property for 99 years as opposed to buying the property. So there are people that have no choice and they want to live in a certain area and they sign a lease. I've recently come to learn that that term has been altered based on the ownership belonging to the Christian community. And people are now leasing property for 30 years or, in that realm. And I'm curious if you don't mind explaining to me and our listeners, what is happening in the town of Jerusalem? Who's owning these properties? And maybe there's not enough information that you have. I'm just curious if you can shed light to it in terms of how do they own so much property? Do they have the ownership rights over it? What is the real estate like in Jerusalem and in Israel in general when it comes to the religion and, who's controlling it really? And what kind of pathway do we have to grow? I mean, we're waiting for Mashiach to come and have the third base of Mikdash. What's going to happen then? I'm curious about this topic, if you can shed some light.
This is not my area of expertise. However, it's highly variegated. The largest landowners here in Jerusalem are the Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church, by far. In fact, it was only during the Oslo Accords that the Vatican signed diplomatic relations with Israel, because if they thought Jerusalem was going to be divided, they needed a seat at the table. So there are many, many places which even the Supreme Court of Israel is sitting on land that's owned by the Orthodox Church. That's one example. Now, there are homes, there's real estate where people really, really own the land. It's not owned by the Orthodox Church, and the land was owned by Jews, like in Talpiot. I know many people who actually do own the land. And then there's land that the state owns the land, and you really are buying the house. So it's not monolithic. It really depends on where you are. Like the David Citadel Hotel I don't know if that status has changed recently or not, but that was sitting on land owned by the Orthodox Church. So it really depends on where you are in Israel. But the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church own enormous property here, and it really is becoming a serious problem.
Right. I mean, is there anything we can do?
Yeah, I'm not the guy. That's not my expertise.
Yeah, but there are people that are focused on it. And
there are people who are focused on it. They would answer that better.
Well, let me ask you a question. Besides your area of expertise that is obvious to the listeners, what else is on your mind? I mean, kids, just what's happening in the world, social media, anxiety, depressions, the war, and, so much happening. Besides this area of what's obviously, takes a majority of your day, what else do you think about that's worrying you or that's...
The big issue right now is one thing. We are living... it's not that we're living before the Messianic age, that we're living in it. That means the meal that we eat on the first night of Pesach is called the Seder, which is an odd name. It means an order, 15 events, discreetly separated. We are living in that right now. This is what occupies my mind all the time. Half the Jews, known Jews in the world, living in the land of Israel. I want to bring the other half back. If they don't come here, which they should, then we're going to get Mamdani in New York. How did a jihadist become the mayor of the largest Jewish city in the world? That's a signal. I mean, every day this is what's on my mind, is that the Jewish people should return now to the land of Israel. The Ramban considers it a mitzvah d'oraisa. I encourage people to read his comment on Numbers chapter 33, verse 53. It's very, very clear. And they should make their way here. If not, like we see what's happening in England. We see what's happening. So they all know their time is up. They see what's happening in Belgium, where circumcision has become banned, and we've been there before. So people, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will keep dialing up the heat. And right now, Jews in the Eretz Yisrael can walk the streets and feel a sense of security. That's what's on my mind all the time.
What do you think is the biggest threat to Judaism today?
The biggest threat would be is if Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, if they wanted to destroy us, he would have to do is the following. Dave Smith would get on his podcast. Tucker would announce to his millions of viewers that I made a huge mistake, and I love Israel and I love the Jewish people. If the world would turn away from its hostility towards Klal Yisrael, it would have a catastrophic impact on us. It means what unites us across the board, no matter what denomination you belong to, is anti-Semitism. That's all I hear about. And people are perplexed by it because it doesn't make sense. Why the Jews? Why now? It so doesn't make sense. Why would there be an opposition to people who believe America first to the notion that the most dangerous country in the world would possess the most dangerous weapon in the world? Let's say you don't care about Israel. If Israel, I have never been told that Israel has nuclear weapons. I'm going to assume they do. Okay. And Iran certainly was very close to it. If Iran would have had a nuclear weapon and launched it at Israel, and Israel would respond in time, and it has submarines that probably have nuclear weapons, what would occur? It would be a nuclear winter. America would be destroyed. So if you believe in America only, in America first, if you're a Buchananite, it really is very important to you that Iran does not possess a nuclear weapon. And unlike North Korea, which you might think is crazy in Iran, they're not. North Korea has nuclear weapons, which they acquired during the Clinton administration, in order to prevent anyone from attacking them. It's defensive. But Iran is a Shia Islam iteration. That means they're incentivized to see this end-time war with the Jews. So therefore, it doesn't even make sense. That means let's play a thought experiment. So India and Pakistan both hate each other and are both nuclear powers since the late 90s, right? If they were to have a nuclear exchange, I mean, unless you lived in New Zealand, the world would be destroyed. There would be radioactive material that would spread all over the world. It would be catastrophic is only the word I don't have another word, but it would be worse than that, a global catastrophe. And we don't want them having a nuclear exchange. So therefore, the anti-Semitism doesn't even make sense. It's not rational. Right now, everybody should want Iran to be prevented from accessing nuclear weapons. So therefore, it's l'mayla min hateva. The anti-Semitism doesn't make sense. Why would you hate the Jews? Have you been mugged by an accountant? Like, what do you want from Jews? All they do is invent a vaccine for polio and figure out how to get penicillin into a pill form so that American soldiers fighting World War II won't die from infection. Like, what do you want? They probably delivered you. So the anti-Semitism is irrational. People are catching on to that.
Right.
So if they wanted to destroy us just like us, and we would, like what Israel enjoyed, I'll change that. What the Jewish people enjoyed during the time Napoleon led, let's say from the 1799 to 1815, where Jews enjoyed emancipation, was actually in the long run was very bad because it triggered enormous assimilation. The consequences were enormous.
A little bit of a lighter side of things for a
Please.
second, because this has been fascinating to me, and so much that I'm learning from, and I want to get back to it in a minute. On a lighter note, do you vacation? Do you get away? Do you take time off to yourself? How do you, I mean, this topic is causing me a little bit of angst just sitting here and listening to it. So I can't imagine what it's doing to someone like you on a constant basis because you're battling it. How do you step away from it all?
Yeah, but I'm doing the thing I would do. I love what I do. I mean, if I were doing real estate, I would not really want to do real estate. I just want how people make money in real estate. I mean, no one really enjoys the actual selling and buying a house. Maybe they get some sort of thrill from it, I don't know. But I do what I love. Now, when I made Aliyah in 2019, in June 2019, by March of 2020, COVID broke out. So everything shut down. So the thought about a vacation, where really would I want to go? England? Like just walk the streets of Manchester? In case you, the viewer, haven't seen Manchester, it's a nightmare. You don't want to be there. So where exactly do I want to go? Like I'm where I always wanted to be, where I prayed about being. And I live in Jerusalem. Like where would I go that's better? I mean, that's it.
Okay, that's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
I think I'll tell you this, when I walk out the door and I just can't believe I'm here every day.
So it's almost like you're living
I'm living in Disneyland, but it's real. It's not fake.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is really wonderful. And I appreciate that perspective a lot. I'm just curious in general, like how do you unwind? You know,
and my work is what makes me happy.
Yeah.
Getting that email, I was in the church for many years and I did tshuva, meeting someone on the street who tells me that, his whole family converted. That's
so you hear about conversions of people that come back.
It's large numbers.
It's large numbers. You're not keeping tally or anything.
I'm not going to tally, but it's very large.
We're talking about hundreds?
Oh, no. There are millions and millions of people watching me on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I have no idea. And I imagine, I don't know, and it's not
germane. Yeah.
Let's think about your favorite authors or your favorite YouTube person out there. You don't really you're not trying to contact them. So most people are not contacting me, but I bump into them and they want to talk and they tell me. So I know that it's making a difference. Every video.
I love that.
The other thing is I don't need to travel. I used to have to travel because in order to convey the information, I had to speak in front of a very large audience. Not that I'm not doing that now, but now there's YouTube, so it's not necessary. Combine that with in Israel, I'm safe, but in America, as an example, you see what happened to Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
So there's so much security involved in me doing public speaking. It just is I do that, but this is a complication that
I understand. So keeping it light and
so far you have not managed.
I'm going to get there.
But there's nothing about what I do that's light, so you don't have a chance.
I'm going to say keeping it more, recreational in terms of your life, and also an interest of what you have. Tell me about some of your favorite spots in Israel to go to and why.
I really am a Jerusalem only person.
So tell me some of your favorite spots in Jerusalem.
Oh, within 3 miles. Aha, there's my defiancy. It's miles. Stop with the kilometers. That's a French concept. It's, within just a few miles of the old city is where I'm happy. And that's where I'm really at peace. I enjoy visiting Hebron. I enjoy going to other cities. I went to a wedding, was it 2 nights ago in Ashkelon? It was very nice. But I very, very much enjoy Yerushalayim.
And what's happening with the whole King David, right? There's a lot going on now that's being unearthed. Are you familiar with that whole...
You mean in the city of David?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. That's rich.
Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, of course. That's the most archaeologically rich place that we have access to. I mean, the most would be the actual Temple Mount, but we don't have access to digging there. We could only, but we can't. Soon we will, probably. But so the city of David is just south of the old city. You'd go out of Dung Gate, which is the southernmost part of the old city. But as it turns out, during biblical times, the city of Jerusalem, the walled city of Jerusalem, was further south. So, like, for instance, where Damascus Gate is, which is in the northern part of the old city, for those who don't know, this is very tiny. It's less than a square kilometer, not mile, less than a square kilometer. It's extremely tiny. But as it turns out, the Jerusalem, the walled city of Yerushalayim, you would move it. So the parts that are in the northern part, like Lion's Gate, Damascus Gate, those parts were not inside of Jerusalem in temple times. It would be much further south. And for those who are familiar with the old city, right behind the court where the menorah is and so on, there's actually the wall from the time of the first temple, from the time of Sennacherib. So the old city, it wasn't called the old city then, so Jerusalem then in biblical times was further south and went down to the city of David. That's what's very, very critical. The only part of today's old city and the old city, I did it again. Jerusalem of biblical times that have in common is the Temple Mount and the Jewish Quarter. The Jewish Quarter is the southwest part of the old city. So it's marvelous that's the Jewish Quarter. So the city of David is where the kings were, where their palace was. That's where the rich archaeology is. That's where Tanakh is. That's where the Bible was written. Not all of it, but Isaiah, Micha, Zephaniah, Tzefaniah, Yirmiyahu. That's where they preached. Zechariah. This is where they all lived and preached and wrote. It's all there. All the kings were there. It's mind-blowing. It's just you feel like it can't be real, but it is real. It's the real
And you're
thing.
watching it being unearthed and coming up with things. And
I'll share this thought with you, and I think you'll relate to this. So logically, when we look at the Western Wall, so we know it's the what is remaining of essentially of the Second Temple, right? So it should be a nightmare to see the Kotel, the Western Wall, should cause pain in us because it's essentially a relic of what once was. And in fact, we have a minute to tear our shirt when we see it, especially the first time. So why are people so uplifted? Why so happy there? This will explain the city of David. This will explain the Western Wall. It should be just we look at it and go, gosh, look what Vespasian, look what Titus did to us. It should cause us to just feel sad. Why is there such a numinous feeling of hope? It's very simple. What will happen to the Western Wall when the Messiah comes? We're very close now. So there's a third temple that's coming. It's described with every detail in Ezekiel chapter 40 through 48. What will happen to the Western Wall when Mashiach comes? Well, as it turns out, it'll be the first wall of the Messianic temple. Therefore, right, they're not going to take it down and build a new one. It's perfectly good. And in fact, it's also earthquake proof. It means whereas there were numerous earthquakes in Israel and it doesn't matter when, but there were plenty of them in the 4th century, in the 7th century, 8th, 9th. There's earthquakes. It's not actually in Jerusalem. It happens in the Dead Sea area. The Kotel never moves, never has fallen. The Church of Holy Sepulchre has. They all have. Not. So when Mashiach comes, that will be the first wall of the Messianic Beis HaMikdash. Therefore, because of this, when a Jew looks at this, gazes upon it, we intuitively, it's not that we've thought through what I'm saying now, because you who are watching me right now are going, now I know. It's not like I'm telling you something you didn't feel, but now we can make sense out of this whole. The reason why we feel such comfort, why we feel like we're in the bosom of God, we're next to the Shekhinah of the Western Wall, which the Medrash says would never be destroyed and the Shekhinah would never leave there. Very explicitly says that. But we're there, we're also looking at our future, not just our past. We're looking at the first part of the Messianic temple described in Tanakh, and therefore it's our hope, not just a sad past.
That's a very nice way of looking at it, by the way. I feel like putting up a sign so people know when they come in why we're happy. By the way, I partnered up with a very holy Jew in Israel a few years ago, and we put a vending machine right outside the Kotel, and we have Kriya shirts that people can buy for 10 shekel and rip a shirt and get that mitzvah. Right. So I'm always mesmerized about this topic, about the old city and the Kotel and being happy when you're walking in. It's an interesting thing. You're doing Kriya, you're doing a mitzvah of remembering, but right then you have to go into the happy mode of looking forward.
But no one has to work on being happy, meaning what I'm submitting is that all of us, when we come to the Western Wall, when we daven there, we feel happy. It's euphoric. It's numinous. We feel hope. Why? That should show us how vulnerable we are to our enemies. This is the only thing that survived of Titus in the year 70 when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Why are we so happy there? Why is there dancing there? Because that's the Beis HaMikdash. For those who don't know this, if you want to get a sense of the size of the third temple, if you see the Dome of the Rock, the temple, the Messianic temple, will be 3 times the size of the Dome of the Rock. So imagine Dome of the Rock. So that's 1/3 of the height of the final temple.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Loving this conversation, appreciating you tremendously. We're going to have to wrap up shortly. I'd like to end off our podcast with a couple of things. So first, I'm going to ask you, do you have any questions for me? Nothing to debate. Just if you have any questions.
What would you want me to ask you?
Wow. What would I want you
See,
to ask
gotcha.
me?
Yeah.
Great question. I appreciate
You know
that
why
question.
I think that we're both that we're all in such. I want to bring out a point rather than this to be some sort of mental exercise. I think that we're so oversaturated with information and feelings of high and pain and wonder and what's going to be tomorrow. I know that when you wake up in the morning, one of the first things you do is run on the computer or your cell phone and you look up the news and want to know what happened in the last 7 hours, right? And then we go, wow, I can't believe that happened, right? So we are so in overload right now. This is what even again, we don't know each other, but we do. In fact, we're not in our middle ages or whatever we are. We're both 3,300 years old. We're an ancient people, and we're standing on the shoulders of our ancestors. And without knowing you, I am confident that one of the thoughts that's passed by through your mind is, why am I Chaim here, but my great-great-grandfather couldn't even dream of being here? And I know you've thought that. Like, why me? My great-grandmother was a giant. Why am I here? And I don't know why, and neither do I. But we are, according to God's plan and his perfect wisdom and understanding. So what I think has just happened between us is that we are so overloaded with emotion and feeling and understanding that we're actually living through in real time. Therefore, it's hard for us to think outside of that. Therefore, when you ask me, what would I ask you? You're going, what? What are we talking about? We're talking about how the Mashiach comes. How we're going to ask, like, is Shohei Ohtani going to, that's doesn't even make sense. Like, that's not important. It's not important if so that's what's happening. We're all in, not an overload, but we're all right now very, very aware that there's a tectonic shift that's going on now, a fight in America for a battle for the future of the United States. What will happen in November 2028? What will Trump take out Iran's, enriched uranium? That's what's on our mind. Those are existential threats. I don't want to do this, but I'll just say this. I used to work for Channel 7 here in Israel, broadcasting news and news talk. And then we used to talk about bus bombings during the intifadas, right? Bus number 22, number 18 bus, suicide bomber, 8 people, 10 people were killed. And the trauma was enormous, but that was not an existential threat to the entire state of Israel. It was a terror attack that was confined to that bus. Iran's nuclear program is an existential threat to our survival. What happened since October 7th? If they didn't stop and rape everyone and film themselves and burn babies as, I don't have a word, barbarians, if they had just gone through and sliced through like a blitzkrieg, they could have destroyed Israel. So we know we're in a fight for our survival. And that's where we're all at. And that's why these other matters are tangential. They're just like, who cares?
Right. And it's a great perspective of that. We're in it together. No matter how old we are, we share that history, which is...
We're part of that shalshel. We're part of that chain. We're not in this alone. We're in the spot where our great-grandparents only dreamed about.
What do you say to people who are like, it's dangerous to live in Israel? And
well, they're just completely, there's no point of contact. It means they're not here. It means you and I walk down the streets of Jerusalem. We're safe here.
Yeah.
I mean, Jerusalem having a very, very safe. I mean, even during the time of this rockets or whatever, Jerusalem is very, very safe. In America, when I lecture, I have to be very, very careful about my security here. But I will say this, Israel has a covenant with God. God's hand is over this place. On April 13th, 2024, Iran, for the first time in history, launched an attack directly against Israel. 300 missiles, ballistic missiles, and drones were launched from the 13th to the 14th. If a ballistic missile would have hit any of our mamads, we'd be dead. We'd never survive it. 0 people were killed. one Bedouin girl was injured from a fragment. It means God's hand is here. I worry about America because America must bless Israel. We're going on. I love America. Not only was I born there, but my parents were born there. So I want America to do the right thing. Her security is at stake. England's security is at stake. But Israel has a covenant from God, and that covenant cannot be undone by a quartet or a United Nations. It's sealed in a vault in heaven, and the lease is there for all the world to see in the Torah. So I'm not worried about this. I'm worried about them.
That's a beautiful way to wrap up this conversation. I really appreciate that, and all the words of wisdom from your mouth to all our ears, and I hope to absorb it more. One last thing that I always ask people is if you can recommend someone to be on our podcast, who do you know that would fit something like this in terms of, getting vulnerable, growing, learning? Who's someone that you would interview as a podcast?
The people who I want to speak to are people who lived in history. The Abarbanel I would want to spend time speaking to and listening to.
Yeah, I can't summon anyone like that, but I definitely appreciate it. Thanks. Shout out again to Ben Bodenheim for recommending you, and always love hearing good feedback and listening to people and asking me to get people on who can get vulnerable and growing, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you to all of our listeners, our subscribers, the comments. We love it all. Thank you to the Prime Source production team and to the great work that we're doing as a company as a whole. It was great to have you on.
Thank you so much.
That's a wrap. Wow. This is amazing.